Hey everyone, Farid here. Welcome back to the channel. So let's talk about the Torah. You know, the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. It's the story of creation, Noah's Ark, Abraham and Moses parting the Red Sea. For billions of people, this isn't just a book. It's the literal word of God. The story we're all told is that Moses himself wrote this stuff down around 3,500 years ago, probably on stone tablets while wandering in the desert. It's the bedrock of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It is the foundational document of Western civilization. Right? Wrong. What if I told you that the entire traditional timeline is off by over 1,000 years? What if the evidence shows that the Torah wasn't written in the deserts of Sinai, but in the heart of Alexandria, Egypt, the most intellectually advanced city in the ancient world? And what if it wasn't written by Moses under divine inspiration, but by a committee of scholars who were sitting in the Great Library of Alexandria, basically creating a national epic for the Jewish people, using pagan myths and Greek philosophy as their source material? Think of it like this. They weren't taking dictation from a god. They were doing research. Their sources weren't divine tablets. They were the scrolls of Babylonian historians and the dialogues of Plato that were sitting on the library shelves right next to them. Today, we're not just throwing out wild theories. We're diving into the hard evidence and the work of scholars like Russell G. Merkin to show you exactly why the Torah is a Hellenistic fabrication. We're going to put the official story on trial. So buckle up, because the history you thought you knew is about to get a serious rewrite. Let's get into it. All right, so if you're a prosecutor building a case, the first thing you do is check the suspect's alibi. And the alibi for the Torah is that it's been around since about 1400 BCE. So let's check the receipts. Let's look at the historical record. If a document as important as the Torah, the supposed constitution and holy book for an entire nation, actually existed, you'd expect to find traces of it, right? It would be the most important text they had. You'd expect other books, letters, or even pottery inscriptions from that period to quote it or at least mention it. You'd expect neighboring empires like the Egyptians or the Assyrians, who kept meticulous records, to say something about this unique monotheistic culture and its bizarre laws. But there's nothing. For 1,000 years, the historical and archaeological record is completely silent. It's not just that we haven't found a copy of the Torah from that time, it's that we haven't found any evidence that the culture described in the Torah even existed back then. The stories, the laws, the religious practices, they're all ghosts. Think about it. We have the Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia. We have the Book of the Dead from Egypt. We have legal codes, poetry, and royal histories from all over the ancient world. But from ancient Israel, during the supposed time of the judges and early kings, there's a deafening silence when it comes to any mention of Abraham, Moses, the Exodus, or the intricate laws of Leviticus. It's like a 1,000-year-long ghost story. The book supposedly exists, but nobody seems to have seen it, heard of it, or lived by its rules. This isn't just a lack of evidence, it's evidence of a lack. The dog isn't just quiet, it's not barking at all, which is the most suspicious thing. Therefore, this gaping hole in the record forces us to look forward in time, to the first moment we do have hard physical evidence of what the Jewish religion actually looked like. And what we find is not what you'd expect. All right, so we've established that for 1,000 years, the Torah's alibi is full of holes. There's a giant awkward silence in the historical record. This brings us to the elephant in the room. And I mean that literally. We need to talk about the Elephantine Papyri. So, on an island in the Nile River called Elephantine, there was a community of Jewish soldiers serving the Persian Empire back around 450 to 400 BCE. And because the climate was so dry, their documents, their marriage contracts, legal disputes, letters, you name it, survived. This isn't a religious text. This is a real-life, day-to-day snapshot of what Jewish life and religion actually looked like just 130 years before the Torah suddenly appeared. And what these documents show is the single most damning piece of evidence against the traditional story. Their religion is totally, completely, and utterly alien to the one described in the Torah. Let's go through the checklist. First, the temple. The book of Deuteronomy is crystal clear. There can only be one central temple for Yahweh, and it has to be in Jerusalem. Guess what? The Jews at Elephantine had their own fully functioning temple right there in Egypt, and they talk about it all the time in their letters. That's strike one. Second, the monotheism thing. The number one rule in the Torah is, you shall have no other gods before me, right? Well, the Elephantine Jews worshipped Yahweh and his wife. Yep, they make offerings to the goddess Anat Yahu, who they saw as Yahweh's divine consort. They worshipped a whole pantheon. This isn't monotheism. It's just regular ancient polytheism with Yahweh as the main character. Strike two. Third, the Sabbath. Keep holy the Sabbath day. Don't work. Don't even think about work. Well, we have their business documents and loan agreements written and dated on Saturdays. We even have a record of a boat owner threatening one of his employees saying, if you don't pick up these vegetables on Saturday, I'll have you killed. So not exactly a day of rest. That's a massive strike three. But the real knockout punch isn't what's in these documents. It's what's missing. In this entire treasure trove of texts, there is not one single solitary mention of Moses. No Abraham, no Isaac or Jacob, no story of the Exodus from Egypt even though they were living in Egypt, no reference to the Ten Commandments or any of the laws from the Torah. Now, the obvious counter-argument is, well, maybe they were just a weird fringe group who didn't follow the rules. The problem is, they weren't. We have their letters written directly to the high priest in Jerusalem. They're communicating with the highest religious authorities back in their homeland. And in those letters, not only do the Elephantine Jews not mention the Torah, the priests in Jerusalem never write back saying, hey, guys, what's with the illegal temple and the extra goddess? Did you not get the memo from Moses? Nobody says anything because there was nothing to say. Therefore, the only conclusion that fits the evidence is that the memo from Moses, the law, the Torah, it hadn't been written yet. This is the smoking gun. This is what mainstream Judaism looked like right before the Hellenistic age, and it looked nothing like the Bible. So the Torah is a ghost before 400 BCE. The Jewish religion we see in the Elephantine Papyri looks nothing like what's in the Bible. Then, a little over a century later, around 270 BCE, the Torah just appears. And it doesn't just appear in Hebrew, it appears almost simultaneously in a perfect word-for-word translation called the Septuagint. What on earth happened in that 130-year gap? Well, the action moves from the quiet military outpost on the Nile River to the bustling, multicultural, intellectual capital of the entire world, Alexandria, Egypt. After Alexander the Great conquered basically everything, his general Ptolemy took over Egypt. His son, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, wanted to turn Alexandria into the undisputed center of knowledge. To do that, he built the Great Library, and his goal was simple and wildly ambitious: to own a copy of every single book in the world. He was especially interested in collecting the laws of all the nations he ruled. According to a text called the Letter of Aristus, Ptolemy heard about the legendary laws of Moses and sent a formal request to the high priest in Jerusalem. The story goes that he invited a team of 72 Jewish and Samaritan scholars to Alexandria, put them up in style, and commissioned them to produce a definitive version of their laws for his library, translated in Greek. This project gives us both the motive and the opportunity. The motive? A direct royal commission from the most powerful king in the region. You don't say no to that. The opportunity? Unprecedented. You have a team of the best bilingual, literate scholars gathered together for one purpose, with a royal budget. And most importantly, you have the setting. This isn't a story about a prophet alone on a mountain. This is a state-sponsored literary project happening inside the single greatest concentration of knowledge in the ancient world. These scholars had access to the entire catalog of human thought: Babylonian histories, Egyptian myths, Greek philosophy, epic poems, legal codes, everything, all under one roof. But What happens when you put a bunch of smart guys in a library and tell them to write their people's foundational text? They don't just write from memory. They don't just channel the divine. They use sources. And those sources were sitting on the shelves right next to them. Okay, so picture the scene. You're one of the scholars in the Library of Alexandria, tasked with creating a national epic. You've got unlimited access to the greatest collection of knowledge ever assembled. What do? You do what any writer does. You look for inspiration. And the inspiration was all around them. The Torah isn't a divinely dictated monologue. It's a brilliant synthesis, a literary mashup of the greatest hits of the ancient world. Let's break down their main sources. First up, the Mesopotamian influence. Just a few years before the Torah was written, a Babylonian priest named Berosus wrote a complete history of his people in Greek. It was fresh off the press and a bestseller in the library. And guess what's in it? Berosus describes a creation from a watery chaos. Genesis, the earth was a formless void, and darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Berosus lists 10 long-lived kings who ruled before a great flood. Genesis lists 10 long-lived patriarchs, Adam to Noah, who lived before a great flood. Berosus tells the story of a flood survivor, Sethustroth, who built a boat, saves his family and animals, sends out birds to check for dry land, and offers a sacrifice when he lands. Genesis tells the story of Noah, who does all of those exact same things. The first 11 chapters of Genesis read like a direct response to and retelling of Berosus. The authors took the Babylonian framework and filed off the serial numbers. Next, where did they get the story of Moses and the Exodus? Well, they borrowed from contemporary historians who were trying to explain the origins of the Jewish people. A Greek historian named Hecaius, writing around 315 BCE, tells a story, the first story ever by the way, of an Egyptian man named Moses who leads a group of foreigners out of Egypt to colonize the then empty land of Judea. Sound familiar? Then you have Manetho, an Egyptian priest who tells his own stories about Egypt expelling a group of leprous troublemakers who go on to found Jerusalem. Now, neither of these is the biblical Exodus story, but they provide all the raw materials: a leader named Moses, an exit from Egypt, a journey to Judea. The Torah's authors took these existing narratives, some of which were pretty negative, and remixed them. They turned a story of expulsion into a heroic story of liberation. It's brilliant PR. This is the big one. The authors weren't just borrowing plots. They were borrowing an entire philosophical and political blueprint from the most famous thinker of the age, Plato. Plato's books, like Laws and Timaeus, were all the rage in Alexandria. In them, he lays out the perfect recipe for creating a stable, holy nation. What do you need? Plato. You need a divine, all-powerful creator god who fashions an orderly universe out of chaos. Genesis 1, that's the god of Genesis, who is very different from the petty, squabbling gods of earlier myths. Plato. To found a nation, you need a wise, divinely inspired lawgiver like Moses to bring the laws from the gods to the people. Exodus, that's the entire job description of Moses. Plato. He even recommends that for the perfect state, you should divide the citizens into 12 tribes. The Torah. How many tribes of Israel are there? 12. The authors of the Torah use Plato's philosophy as the operating system for their new national story. Therefore, when you look at the Torah, you're not looking at a single ancient document. You're looking at a mosaic. The myths are Mesopotamian, the historical characters are borrowed from Greek and Egyptian writers, and the entire philosophical structure is pure Plato. They weren't prophets. They were brilliant editors creating something new out of the world of ideas they lived in. All right, I know that was a lot of information. So let's put this synthesis theory to the test with one perfect, undeniable example: the Great Flood. Now, if you've been on the internet for more than 5 minutes, you probably know that the story of Noah's Ark is a direct ripoff of much older Mesopotamian myths, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. The whole plot is there. A god decides to wipe out humanity. He warns one good guy to build a giant boat. The hero saves his family and pairs of animals. He sends out birds to find dry land. The ark lands on a mountain. It's the same story structure. The authors of Genesis clearly borrowed the what and the how of the flood story from their Babylonian neighbors, whose texts they found in the library. Case closed on that front. But, and this is the crucial part that most people miss, have you ever asked why the flood happens in each story? The motivations are completely different. In the Babylonian version, the gods decide to wipe out humanity because they're being too noisy. Seriously, humans are partying too hard, the gods can't get their afternoon nap, so they decide to just kill everyone. It's divine pest control. There's no deep moral lesson here. Now think about the Genesis version. Why does God send the flood? Because humanity had become wicked. The earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. The flood is a divine punishment for moral failure. It's a cosmic reset button to wash the world clean of sin. So where did the authors get this brand new, sophisticated moral justification? They didn't just invent it. They got it from the same place they got their other big ideas, Plato. In Plato's story of the lost city of Atlantis, he describes a magnificent civilization founded by the children of a god. But over generations, their divine nature gets watered down. They become corrupt, greedy, lawless, and violent. And so the king of the gods, Zeus, decides to punish them by sending a cataclysmic flood and earthquake that wipes their entire wicked civilization off the map. You see what happened here? The authors in Alexandria performed a literary transplant. They took the body of the story, the plot, the mechanics from the Babylonian myths. Then they ripped out its primitive heart and replaced it with a brand new philosophical one borrowed directly from Plato. They fused Mesopotamian plot with Greek morality. The result is the story of Noah's Ark as we know it today. It's not ancient history, it's not divine revelation, it's a perfect Hellenistic mashup, and it's one of the best pieces of evidence we have for when, where, and how the Torah was really written. So, let's put it all together. The traditional story asks you to believe that the Torah existed for over 1,000 years without leaving a single trace, no artifacts, no mentions, nothing. It asks you to ignore hard evidence like the Elephantine Papyri, which show a pre-Torah Jewish culture that was polytheistic and didn't follow any of the book's main rules. Then you have to believe that it's just a wild coincidence that the Torah suddenly appears in Alexandria at the exact moment when the Great Library contained all the source material, from Berosus' flood story to Plato's political philosophy, needed to write it. The evidence, when you look at it rationally, points to a far more plausible conclusion. So what does all this mean? The Torah wasn't a record of ancient history beamed into a prophet's brain. It was a product of history, specifically the history of the 3rd century BCE. It was a masterful political and literary project designed to create a national identity in a new Hellenistic world. It took the stories of its neighbors and the philosophy of the Greeks and forged them into something new, something that would give the Jewish people a powerful foundation story and a unifying legal code, a constitution, just as Plato had recommended. It's not the word of God from 1400 BCE. It's the work of very clever men in 270 BCE. And recognizing that doesn't diminish the text, it helps us understand what it truly is. We don't have to pretend it's a perfect book of science or history. Instead, we can appreciate it for what it actually is, arguably one of the most successful and influential pieces of Hellenistic literature ever created. It's a testament to human creativity and the power of storytelling to shape civilizations. What do you think? Does the evidence hold up? Let me know what you think down in the comments below. I read as many as I can. And if you enjoy having your entire worldview shaken up on a regular basis, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss the next video. Your support helps keep this channel going and allows me to keep tackling these big questions. Thanks for watching. I'm Farid, and I'll see you next time.